today we got a quick model request from Lycan, who says that he wants to have a group of ships all have an attack animation, and he's okay with doing it himself. He just wants me to do one of them so I can explain to him how to do it. And he basically said this thing, Galleon V2, is the thing that he wants to get the animation from, and anything from this folder he wants to put the animation into. So let's just double click ship Bark here as the top one. I set up on my computer. When I double click one of these, it should just launch the model in Redditor Studio, so we should be able to take a look at it. But there's kind of a little bit of a load time there while that loads up. I still gotta make things faster. Cool, so here's the one that we're gonna get the attack animation from, looks like, which is this kind of thing here. I hadn't looked at this before making this video, so yeah, we'll see how that goes. It's interesting because I guess it's doing a broadside attack, right? So like stand is here and then attack is this broadside. And for all I know, sometimes these things don't always preview in my program the way they do in the game. So could totally be that they're better over there. Oh, that's interesting. This actually has something that wants to be the same, but it's called spell first and spell second. Interesting. We just want to put that broadside attack from this guy in there. Alright, well, one of the questions we're going to have to ask is this a particle emitter, or is this a series of rectangular effects meshes? And it looks like it is a particle emitter. So that should be pretty straightforward to do. If we're just going to copy that, I'm assuming then, yeah, you can see, okay, there's a whole bunch of particle nodes. Looks like here. Sometimes in this preview it's even harder to see particles than in the other stuff. But yeah, it's definitely like, see, I guess cannon top and cannon bottom. So that's really interesting because I guess they must be like, oh yeah, they're on this side too. They move, so you see we have the two nodes there, and if we go to attack, like right now the emitter is here, and pretty soon the emitter is here. So the emitters are basically just moving, and we can actually see them. If I select both of them, we can actually jump to their frames with the left arrow. We see them moving across there, and then the one on the bottom moves. So that's really interesting. And it should be very doable to transfer that, but it just means we gotta transfer those particle emitters, right? And then just pretty much make them move the same exact way. It does look like they take a step on every single cannon, so we want to make sure we move to each exact one. So then we kind of turn our interests to this other model, which actually we could go ahead and open the other model in our same program. So sometimes it helps if they're open in the same instance, right? Like previously I had them not in the same instance. Now I have them both in two separate windows. So we have this guy we were just looking at, and we have ship Bark in a separate window in the same thing. So you see ship Bark, this is actually going to be a lot easier than we thought because it only has 4 cameras on each, or excuse me, 4 cannons on each side. So I think all we really need to do basically is do an animation transfer. So I know sometimes people can do like add animation single from file or something, right? And like add an animation from the other guy, or add animation single from, I guess there's not a workspace option here, but you could make one. Anyway, so what I like to do is import from Workspace because it gives me the power to do everything, to do whatever I want to do, right? I've made some other videos that kind of talk about this, but this imports everything. Like by default, if I push OK, we're going to have 2 ships in one model, almost like alternate animations, which isn't what we want, right? So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to leave all of that other ship's physical shape, right? Like we're not importing that at all. We're just doing an animation transfer. And then we get to animation here, and we're just going to leave out all these animations except attack, right? We're just going to take the attack animation. And sometimes what people do is they do animation blending. Like maybe you want this attack to play in the stand of the other model, and so you can say time scale it into the stand of the other model. But we don't want to do that. We just want to import attack as is. It's going to become a new animation. Then we have the question of if I'm importing that attack animation in, you know, is it applying to a new copy of the boat? You know, we're gonna have 2 boats in one model, or are we like blending it into the motion of the existing boat? And so that's what the bone tab is for here, right? So what I'm going to do is blend it into the existing boat that we're importing into. You can see the boat on the left here. This is where the animation's coming from. It tries to give us a little preview there, although it's hard to see. And this is the one we're putting the animation into. And so I can choose with that, like which part of that big boat are we going to put the animation into. But you can see, well, there's a couple ways to look at it, but basically, like gmesh04 here, I assume, I'm kind of making an assumption, it would be that the root of this. Oh yeah, so there's also helper root. So actually what you could do, if you want to be really fancy, is instead of importing to gmesh04, you could actually import to the root, which should just apply to even more of everything, right? And I'm just saying, we're just going to copy the simple rotation animation for that attack, and we're going to put that in the root of the guy we're bringing it into. Matrices tab pertains to if you, while you're doing an animation transfer, if you need to change what things are attached to what. It's almost like overcomplicated. For years I thought I should rebuild this, so a lot of times it's something like this, you just ignore it. Objects here, this is key because you got to get your cannon fire, right? So we have cannon top and cannon bottom. In the new model, there's only one cannon. There's only one row, right? There's not top and bottom. So I would say just take cannon top, and we'll just use that one. All the rest of this stuff is probably just, you want to just leave all. That's what I clicked up here, is this leave all. That basically says that by default, all these other animation things we're just going to leave behind. But we do want that cannon top, that particle. We're bringing that with our animation transfer. And then for visibility at the end, this can be a little annoying because pretty much all of your particles and stuff in the new animation, they don't know whether to hide or not, you know? So this kind of brings up the question, how much mesh is there in this thing, right? Like, do we want all this stuff visible in the new animation? And I think the answer is yes, right? We definitely want, like, all these parts of the ship, all these things should be visible, I think. And sometimes you have a model that'll have a second copy of itself for like when it dies or for like the corpse or something. And you probably want those to be invisible, but we don't have to worry about that there. So it's fine to just say always visible on the imported animation stuff. The other thing is the particle emitters in the imported animation. You know, a lot of people when they do a simple animation transfer look at it wrong and their new animation like has all the particles showing or something, which you don't want, right? All we really want is this little ripple at the bottom. So what we're going to do, I'm pretty sure that little ripple at the bottom is probably particle stand. It's probably not the one called walk. That's why some human put that name in there for us to help us out. And it's not this particle called attack, which is sort of misnamed, right? Because like there wasn't an attack animation, but I'm sure that must be the particle that was in the spell. Because the green box here, that means it's the model I'm importing into. So these are all things that were already there, and we don't want them to show up. We only want the stand and stand 01 to show up. So we're just going to have that basic stand water, and we've imported in the rotation, so we're going to rotate during our attack, and then we're going to import in this cannon. And you know the cannon's not going to be in the right place, but it's still going to be there, and we're going to be able to fix it. So the other thing that's key here, the other thing that's key is, what does this cannon do for all the other animations, right? I'm importing the cannon in for the attack, but what does the cannon do during the stand? Is that going to be there? Maybe it's not going to be there. So that's what we have this existing animation visibility for in the cannon, right? So I'm just going to say for the existing animations, for everything else, like the stand and these other things that are already there in the model I'm merging into, the cannon's going to be not visible. That way the cannon fire only shows up in the new animation. It really kind of makes a lot of sense if you think about it. So now I'm going to click finish, and the hope is that things just kind of work as we expect. Unfortunately, it seems to be the case that the boat doesn't rotate during attack, so I would already say something didn't work how I thought it would. But you can see the cannon fire's there, and the cannon fire is kind of doing its thing. So we got some research to figure out why did my rotation not apply, you know? And you can kind of go in a little animation previewer here and tweak things, right? But so like if I'm in this attack animation, why does, you can see that the little cannon fire goes from side to side like you would expect, but the main helper thing, this helper right here, you can actually select it and you can see its keyframes, and we can see that, does it have a rotation keyframe? It does, but it doesn't appear to actually rotate. So this would probably mean one of two things. Either while I was importing I made a mistake, which is totally possible, or sometimes there are things that don't inherit rotation. That could be set that when we rotate this root, the subcomponents of the model wouldn't rotate. So I'm going to make a backup of this file because it takes a long time to set up those animation transfers, and so it could be a really good idea to make a backup after you do it. If I go in and break the model right now after just doing all those settings for the import, I'd have to do all the import again. So I'm just making shipbark attack 01. It's like the first base after I imported, even though things didn't work. We might replace it later. We might sometimes redo the import, but hopefully not. So what I'm going to ask the question here is, if I rotate this, what does that do? What does that do? And it doesn't seem like it does anything, you know? And so that's really interesting. I would assume that's either due to some kind of don't inherit or something else. So I'm actually just a curious person, and I like to know the answer when something doesn't work. So let's just save it as MDL and open it in a notepad. And I know that's a little weird, but it's informative. Someday we'll make a better program, we won't have to do it. So we're just going to look at this thing in notepad. I'm specifically interested in root, and I'm just trying to see here what's going on with its rotation. So what we see is that in the rotation of this root that I tried to import into, it's got a global sequence going on. So that essentially means that it doesn't do what you want it to do, and that's fine, really. What that means is we should probably do it all again, and the reason to do it all again is because you can't have two rotations in one bone, so we can't import into root. So we probably are going to go to gmesh. This guy, see, gmesh. Oh. I'm looking for bone gmesh. Here we go. Bone gmesh has a rotation, but that rotation does not have global sequence on it. So when I import into that, it'll be fine. Global sequence means that it keeps playing on repeat regardless of which animation the model's doing, right? So if you think about it, it makes sense that that's mutually exclusive with doing something specific in the attack animation. Excuse me. So we're going to do it again. We're going to do everything right this time, and we're not going to use root. I thought that was a good idea. Turned out it wasn't a good idea. So we're going to open ship bark again. We're back to the version that has no attack animation, right? I'm just going to walk through the exact same process again. I'm going to go a little bit faster because now we know what we're doing, but I'm going to make sure we get it right. So we're going to leave out all of the geometry, right? We're just one ship. We're not making a model with two ships after this import. We are doing an animation transfer, but we're going to leave all the animations except attack. We're just making a new attack animation. And we're not checking this box to like get rid of existing animations, right? We're keeping all those. So we're taking this attack animation. We're just going to keep that as it is. Bones, we're going to do a transfer. This is what we did wrong before. It's better to just transfer to gmesh 04. That's what we figured out from our research. So we're going to do that. Matrices tab, we'll just ignore it. Objects tab, we just leave everything except the cannon. We got to have that cannon particle. That's important. And visibility, here we have the cannon at the bottom, which we're going to make not visible. And we have all these other particles from the other guy that we're just going to make not visible in the new animation, right? Sorry, I clicked this multiple selection on accident. We're leaving that how it is. We're just changing them to be not visible in the imported animation. And you can do like I just did there. I can shift select, so I'm holding shift and I'm clicking all of them. If you don't want to do that, if you want to waste your time, you could click one and choose not visible, click the next one, choose not visible, and just do them one at a time. I like to save my time, so I just shift select all of them at once. So now I'm going to click finish here, and I think this should actually make it rotate during attack. So that's great. And this is kind of like what we intended when we started off, except that as you can see, the water ripple effect doesn't seem to have rotated. So that's kind of its own problem, and we could fix that later. But let's start with fixing the cannon. You can see the cannon's there, but it's going to the wrong places. It's going to where it used to go for the old boat, right? So we're going to go back to attack over here. We're going to do this again. Basically, we'll just select this guy and make sure you click up here on select and move. We're going to go to its motion. It's moving, right? So the first problem is that the cannon should initially start where the gun is, which it isn't really doing. So that part, if you go back to its base position, now I just jumped there, right? Everything jumped. Why did it do that? It did that because I pressed the A key. It's the same as clicking select vertices up here. And F key goes back to animation mode. That's the same as clicking select and animate. Select nodes and animate. So I'm just jumping between this one and this one. So we're going back to this one here, which is editing the vertices and the base position of this node. I'm going to try to move this node up a bit so he's actually like where initially the cannon was. And it's a little bit annoying when we go back to the animation mode, we have to go back to the attack animation. But that gives us the ability to see, like, okay, this particle is actually coming right out of that first cannon. And that's really good. So this animation used to be broken into a sequence of steps, right, that are sort of for each of the different cannons. And it sort of gives us a bit of trouble because we don't need that many steps, right? We have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, and all we need now is just 4. So we're going to be deleting several of these. But we got the beginning is in the right place. Let's go to the ending and put the ending in the right place, you know? And in order to do that, all we need to do is basically just move it right over here to that cannon. So now we've got the beginning and the ending, but we have way too many in the middle. So let's try to evenly space them out, right? Let me delete these two. And how did I do that? I'm using the left and right arrow keys to go between the blue, these little blue keyframes, and then to delete them, I hit the del key on the keyboard. So we can do that. I can just sort of jump back and forth between these positions where the cannon's firing from. Delete that one because it's just not necessary. And also delete these two. So we have one in the initial cannon. It's apparently in the wrong initial cannon. I thought we fixed that. That's very interesting. Okay, well let's fix it. Seems like somehow that one got shifted over. I didn't think that happened here. So yeah, this very first one. Yeah, interesting. The very first one is not going to the base position. So we'll go back to this attack animation again. We'll go to that first one. And you know what you can do, right? You can actually drag these little keyframes around. So he was originally at 93, 156. You can put him wherever you want just by clicking and dragging. But let's put it back at 93, 156, which is, of course, a little bit of an effort to make sure it gets in the right place. But you can drag them like that, and you can also, especially if you give yourself more space to see it here. Oh, I guess we can't do that with all keyframe in the way. Okay, if we right-click it, you can interact with its data, and what we see the problem is, why did this first keyframe move with the second one? It's because apparently there never was a starting keyframe to begin with, which is just kind of crazy. So what you can do is you can create one. You can go to stand where this thing is in its root position, which we set correctly, and copy that, and then basically go back to attack. And here's the problem, right? You kind of we don't want to paste the visibility. We just want to paste where it is. So we could try to paste this, but it might become visible. And if it does, yeah, that's kind of to be expected. Okay, so undo paste. So what's happening is it's copying many things at the same time. So what we really want to do is go to stand and copy its position, but it doesn't have position data for that. So this is kind of annoying, really. We're in kind of an annoying thing here. I would say what I would do if I were you is drag away to some empty space. So this is kind of a bit of a hack, but if you do copy when there's no frame there, it'll create one using whatever mode you're currently in. So like I'm in the translate mode to move things around, so I just copied it being in its starting position. That's a little bit silly, but that's going to let me, if I go back here to the beginning and I just right click and paste, if you look now at that keyframe's data, it has visibility and translation. And so it should now show. Now it's actually interesting that it's not previewing at all here. Presumably that's because of the visibility data we pasted before, and we must have like accidentally got some bad data on that one. So we definitely need to copy it as being visible, and I guess there's not data of that anywhere, which is bad. So here's what we're going to do. Let's go back to the galleon. Okay, we're just going to cheat a little bit. We're going to go back to the galleon and the attack animation here. At the start of this, right click that guy, cannon top visibility, copy his visibility. Go back to the other model. Sorry, go back to ship bark, the second one that we fixed. Go back to the attack animation, beginning of that attack animation. Right click only in the visibility section, paste it. Tell Redera to code the ability paste cross node data. Alright, apparently I thought I did that. Well, it's kind of junk. Alright. So if you get a configuration like this where you've made a mistake like I did, which has just made my particle emitter not visible at these specific times, even though we can see in the 2D viewers that it's absolutely the case that the particle is now aligned with the cannons, as you would expect. We know what we have to do, right? We basically have to copy to this frame, this visibility, do something that lets us paste that it is visible. But what would that be, right? How would you get a time when it's visible? So I think what we could try here, let's try going to somewhere way out of bounds and try to copy from nowhere out of bounds. This is a crazy idea. This probably won't work. Cool. So we're way out of bounds out here. But you see that? You see that now that the particle is visible again. So can I copy that? That's the question. Copy frame, whole entire model. Okay, we copied the frame, everything in the whole entire model, including that the particle is visible right now. I'm going to go back to attack at the beginning. And I'm going to right click on that frame, and I'm going to only paste the visibility data. Yeah, there we go. That is, so this is what we call bad program design, because you shouldn't have to do that. But I did just do that, and conceptually it worked. Now the other thing that I think we would want to do is space these out a little bit more, so that the times at which each of the cannons fire are like lined up sort of how you'd want, right? So we're going to just like space that one out. Yeah, I think that should be good. So now if you look at this attack animation, right, it goes boom, boom, boom across the cannons, just like the other one. I don't know if there's like an associated sound with this, right? I mean, ideally you'd probably want it to like make a cannon noise each time. You could do that, but maybe that's outside the scope of this video. I'm just trying to transfer this animation. So that looks pretty good. I think the other problem we have, if we go to our original Galleon's attack animation, is it kind of looks like when it's in that configuration, the particle's rotated. So for it, the water wake particle inherits from the base root bone. And for our ship bark, it looks like the water wake doesn't inherit from Gmesh, I don't think. Does it? No, I don't think it does. It has bone attack particle emitter. That's the old attack thing. That's for that weird spell animation. Yeah, so here's the problem, right? This G-mesh thing, when it rotates, which is happening, all this other stuff is rotating with it from the boat, but we're not rotating the standing particles here, right? So, cheesy way to fix it that might break other things, and let's make a backup of the model before we do this. So I'm going to call this shipbark attack 02. We kind of fix some stuff up there. Cheesy way to fix these things, right, would be, let's turn off everything. We're just going to turn on stand and stand 01. These are those water particles that are not rotating correctly. I'm going to select them. I'm going to go into the right click menu, and I'm going to set their parent to be gmesh 04. And what that's going to mean is that as the boat kind of bobbles up and down normally in like stand, I did technically change stand. Maybe we didn't want to do that, but what I've achieved is that while the boat is bobbing up and down here, you can see that looks good. In attack, it's the same way, and so the water is coming out the side. Now, I think there's a glitch in Redder Studio here that the water, like the orientation of facing of those water ripples is super messed up, but it's probably going to be correct in the game because we based it on a model that was kind of correct to begin with. So at this point, if you're still watching, probably you don't even need to keep watching, but let's go ahead and make like a new map, and we can try putting our model in that new map, just to make sure things work here. I think I'm on like some old version of Warcraft, but yeah, these things should still work. So yeah, I think we're in the downloads folder, aren't we? Ships pack attack 03. What we're going to do is just import that, and then does this have some associated texture? Probably does. Let's see. This guy, model textures. Those look like built-in textures. I don't know why when I click this it didn't do anything. I'll fix that later. But yeah, so I think we're good to go. Let's go ahead and save this map as like battleship test or something, you know? Let's see. Battleship test. Sure, I'm going to save our battleship test. Let's save that again. And then we'll try putting it in some water, just kind of like preview how that thing looks. Maybe make two of them, have them shoot each other, you know? Something like that should be good. I don't know why all the menus don't work here. What's going on? Import manager still trying to import? Yeah, it is. Okay. Sorry about that. Yeah, let's go back to the world. Cool. So yeah, here we are in the little world. Put some water down. Got my battleship. So we're gonna save the map. I always save it 2 or 3 times the first time. Usually when the map's first created, there's some kind of problem with that stuff. Human battleship. Let's see. We're gonna load ship bark. Does it preview? It does. Okay, great. So here's the ship bark. Let me go back to unit campaign. Put 2 of these, and now we can sort of answer for ourselves this question: does this attack animation do what we want? Map is now expansion. Great. Okay. Let's try it out, and I think if it works, we're going to call it a success on this video here. Loading it up. Alright, great. That looks promising. So, yeah, here we go. We got this thing, sails around, looking pretty good. So that's kind of hard to see, but I'm telling you, I think the water ripples are going the right way. I think it's when it looks wrong, that's really loud, isn't it? When the water ripples look wrong, I think it's a preview issue with the Redder Model Studio. Yeah, so if you look there, you can see the little cannons are firing one, then the next, then the next. There does seem to be some sort of interpolation between them that I think is happening here, where right at the end of that animation, this particle emitter zooms back and is remaining visible, which is interesting. So I don't know if the initial source model does that. You could do some research on how to fix it, right? Because we're getting a couple of little glows away from our 4 discrete locations. But I would say, for the most part, that's a success there. Obviously, that those discrete locations are coming from the animation blend time, the fact that it's blending the location of the particle instead of just discretely going to where we told it, which is most likely the blend time of the game and not in the model. If you wanted to confirm that, you could save the model as an MDL again, do a little bit of inspection yet again. I'm a big believer in looking at the data, and basically we're just looking for the canon particle, and my question is, in our translation, we have don't interp specified, which means no interpolation between the location of the translation. So the fact that it is still doing that basically just means that the game is being mean, and that's why it only is doing it at the end and the start of the animation, because something in the game is coded Specifically, not just anything is coded, but I think the animation blend time. So you want to get rid of that. You could just go in here and say your animation blend time 2.001, and we could test it in the game again. I'm pretty sure that problem will be gone, and it will only flash the cannon fire at the 4 discrete locations. So we'll confirm that, and then we'll call it a wrap, I think, here. Now, in my opinion, if it were me doing this, I would probably also want to put sounds with each of the cannon fires. So it's like bam, 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 like each time. You could do that, but we didn't yet. So you can see that having no blend time has corrected the problem now, where only the emitter only appears at the 4 discrete locations. Of course, this has the problem that the ship is instantaneously transferring between stand ready and attack, and it doesn't have a stand ready animation where it's sort of sideways broadside like that. So you probably want to make a stand ready animation, but we'll leave that as an exercise for the viewer, I guess. Yeah, so I think in general that looks like that's working. That's a pretty good boat model. I don't know why the all of the sails turned red while it died. I don't think that's my fault. I hope it's not my fault. But yeah, there you go. So I think that's a wrap on that one. That's pretty much how you transfer an animation like that.